It doesn't matter how long you've swum for, there's always things to work on.
Yeah.
But I feel it's just like ripping off a Band-Aid. It's like, it's painful to look at sometimes when you see yourself swim and you go, God, I don't look good. I don't look efficient. It's not a pretty thing to watch. But when you rip it off, it's like, okay, that's the first step to letting it heal.
Welcome to the Low Tide Boys, a Swimrun podcast. I'm Chip.
I'm Chris, and this is episode 237 of the show. We've got a great one for everyone this week. Joining us to talk all things swimming is the founder of Effortless Swimming, Brenton Ford. This guy is a world-class coach, has to be one of the most well-known coaches in the world.
Yes.
If you're not following his IG account where you get a wealth of swimrun tips or swimming tips, lightly swimrun tips for free, you will be after you're
and YouTube channel as well. And if you're not already on YouTube watching this very show here, be sure to head on over to our YouTube channel, subscribe and like, and then going over to Effortless Swimming, find some gold there. But first, training update. So Utsala Whistler, done and dusted. It's in the rearview mirror. Race report episode is in there. I'm still like, oh man, what a great day. It was so fun out there, but quickly, we had a few days of recovery. Boom, right back at it. We have Folsom Swimrun coming up in just 10 days. And then a week after that, Utsala Casco Bay, one of our favorites.
Three-ish weeks.
You're so excited.
I'm so excited. Time is right
now. But we'll be training through the Folsom race. So if you're in the Northern California or California area, get yourself up to Folsom, California, and join us there. Chris and I will be there racing as a team. I think we're going to do the short course, long course combo.
The chipper double.
The chipper special, if you will. And then, getting some up in that swim volume to get ready for the fun times at Utsala Casco Bay. That's coming up in Portland, Maine in early August. So stoked for that.
Yeah.
But speaking of stoked, I'm stoked about the shout-outs and feats of endurance combo this week.
We're doing a combo because we have to highlight everyone that raced Rockman over the weekend. Once again, this epic race did not disappoint. For those who don't know, this year's edition of the race had 51 Ks total with 6 Ks of swimming in chilly fjord waters.
Yeah.
And 45 Ks of quote-unquote extreme trail. And it's like, put rock quotes on it, right?
Yeah, but it's like it's not air quotes. It's like
extreme trail running.
Yeah.
Oh, and there's almost 12,000 feet of elevation gain on the course. So
Lord
literally
Effortless.
everyone that just lined up to do this thing is a legend in our book. Shout out, Feats of Endurance. We see you.
We see you. Kudos have been doled on the Strava Club. Be sure to head on over to Strava, search Low Tide Boys, join in all the fun over there. But again, congrats to all the Rockman finishers there.
Amazing.
Now for a little bit of show business. So I'm sure how much we got so many people hitting us up with FOMO for Whistler. PSA, don't let it happen to you for Casco Bay. Now's your chance. Go register. Sign up for Utsala Casco Bay. We have a 15% off your code, 15% off your race registration. You code LOWTIDE15, LOWTIDE15 to save 15% off your race registrations for any and all of the 2024 events. We'll be at Casco Bay. We'll also be at Austin and Pace Bend Park November timeframe. So excited for the Utsala races out there. There's also Mackinac. You have Mackinac going on. You have Orcas Island. None of them disappoint. Low Tide 15 works for all those.
Yeah.
Now you have, unless you've been living under a rock, you have been hearing Chris and I talk about how much we really have been enjoying the Form goggles. They were a supporter of our show back in May at Utsala Whistler. We did Fika with Form. A bunch of folks came out and got to test the Swim Straight technology in Alta Lake there. Form has also hooked us up with a 15% off discount code off the Smart Swim 1 or even their brand new Smart Swim 2 goggle. But this one, though, it's the secret. You have to send us a DM or email. We'll give you the code, and you can get 15% off. Also, if it's still Prime Day at the time of airing, both the goggles are on sale for Prime Day as well. get them there and get free shipping or whatever you want through your Amazon Prime. But if you're interested in the Form Smart Swim 1 or Smart Swim 2 goggle, this is the first time it's been discounted. Form been cool enough to hook us up with the 15% off. Shoot us a DM. We'll shoot you the super secret.
And I think we have the code will be good through the end of the month.
To the end of July. Awesome. So do not wait. Do not delay today. Couple of 15% off coupon code for you there. Hustle to it, folks. Now, on to our amazing conversation with Brenton Ford, founder of Effortless Swimming.
Yeah, it was really great to chat with Brenton. I mean, we've watched so many of his videos, so it was really great to chat with him about his coaching philosophy, the importance of a strong core. You know, we got his thought from key swimrun workouts could look at. I will say, speaking for myself, I was definitely feeling a little fangirly.
I was trying to, personally, reel that in. It was very surreal talking with him, and I'm like, I've literally seen this dude for hours on YouTube and tried to dissect my stroke there, but I think just the way that he breaks it down and is able to articulate it is, at least for me, I find it really easy to digest and sort of translate to my own. Yeah, it was a great conversation. Love kind of his approach to that, and he's also done a swim run, so bonus points for Brenton.
Yeah,
and he told us that he will do another swim run before he does a triathlon. So bonus.
Yeah, it was great to chat with him. So, check out effortlessswimming.com for more info on his programs, stroke analysis, all that stuff. But I think without further ado,
let's get into it.
Do it.
Cannonball right into this interview with Brenton Ford, founder of Effortless Swimming.
From down under.
Yes.
Where it's winter.
The other hemisphere.
And the toilet swirls in the other direction.
Really does.
We're super stoked for this episode. Welcome to the show, Brenton Ford, the founder of Effortless Swimming. How you doing?
Hey, very well, thanks. Thanks for having me on the podcast. I've seen you guys around, and then we got introduced by Will from Form. And I was like, oh, that'd be really cool to chat with these guys, because I've seen you around for the last couple of years. So thanks for having me on.
Well, appreciate you coming on. I think mentioning
the honor's all ours.
Yeah, the honor's ours. But mentioning Will from Form, he connected us, and I have to say, like, the speed by which this came together to record, I'm just so excited about, and I'm excited to have this conversation. I mean, you're one of the most well-known swim coaches in the world. You've coached thousands of athletes to get faster in the water. Triathletes, all sorts of stuff. You've done Swimrun. Before we get into just like peppering you with questions, which will happen, tell us sort of the origin story of Effortless Swimming and sort of how you developed your coaching philosophy.
Yeah, absolutely. So I was a swimmer growing up. I made a few national finals and just missed out on the Olympic trials when I was in my early 20s. But I started coaching when I went to university and absolutely loved coaching and really enjoyed coaching adults. So I was working with them, and coming from a swimming background, I thought it should be easy to make changes. I'll tell them what to do and they'll be able to fix it. And pretty quickly I realized that's not the case. It takes a little bit more than just telling someone to do something and they're able to change it. So that to me was a really big thing that I had to learn over the last 18 years that I've been coaching, where, just have to figure out ways for people to be able to improve, and for me to be able to see what those things are and to be able to analyze it. It's just been a big journey in uncovering that and learning ways to convey the different things that people need to do. So I started Effortless Swimming in my last year of university, and it took me about 6-7 years to make it a full-time thing. But it's been full-time for the last 9 years or 10 years now. And I just love working with adults and triathletes. And I get a lot of joy and satisfaction from it. I thought it's like a puzzle to be solved. And I'd like to think I'm reasonably good at solving that puzzle now, but I'm still learning and taking away things. And I mean, even chatting to you guys, right? Like I've done one swim run, and this was probably 9 years ago. So it was a long time ago, very early days of it. And I went in with no experience, and it was really, really a challenge. But even still, like I don't know a huge amount about it. Coached a few people in it, but to me, it's still like a fairly new world. So I'm always learning. and that sort of
Well,
stuff.
that's kind of how it is for everybody.
Yeah.
It's a whole new world for everybody. So
We're
there's
still
very
figuring it out
yeah,
too.
there's certainly super experienced swim runners, but for the most part, I think like there are more people who don't know what's going on than there are people that do, which is great. It's shows that a sport is growing and everything. But I want to talk a little bit before we start asking a bunch of questions about form goggles, which we've been using. And I'm curious, as a swim coach who does a lot of work virtually, like with people online and stuff like that, like, what do you think about that technology, specifically like planning workouts and sort of the head coach stuff as someone who basically does it in person?
Yeah, so I use it in probably half my sessions, and then I obviously have a lot of swimmers who use the form goggles, and I was reluctant to try them when they first got in touch. I was like, I'll give them a try, but like I'm kind of anti-tech. I'm a little bit old school,
Yeah.
so I'll see how they go. And I wore them, and then I was like, man, this is awesome to be able to see my splits in training, to have it right there in front of you. I was really impressed, and so I've worked with them for the last couple of years. So I think there's a lot of different uses, and it really just depends on what you want to get out of it. I mean, you've got the open water features of the swim straight, which is a really big feature for a lot of people who struggle to go straight in open water. And I think that's a massive challenge for people, especially, and probably more so in swim run, right? Like, it's depending on the conditions, it can be very hard to see where you're going and some of the distances you have to travel. You want to have a pretty clear direction. So I think that's a huge advantage there in using the goggles. And then, I mean, I primarily just use them in the pool, keeping my splits and just being able to track my pace more than anything. But I also like the way that they're very accurate with the data. I find that my Garmin takes a while to start and stop sometimes, so the paces are out, and it's just doesn't have the accuracy that I'd really like. So yeah, I think there's a whole bunch of features there that make it superior than some of the watches that track things. So what's your experience for you guys? What have you really used them for?
Yeah, I mean, really, I really love them for it. Like, if I am driving to the pool in the morning, I'm like, shit, I forgot my goggles. I will turn around to go get them and then go back to the pool, even though I'll be late to the workout.
It's turnaround worthy.
It's turnaround worthy. So that's how into them. But like, we're sort of an adult onset swimmers, if you will, kind of self-taught. And yeah, like, coming from that triathlon background, just really relying on like, oh, you hit the wall and you're like staring at your watch, like, oh, what did that one do? And it really immediately like increased my enjoyment of swimming in a lap pool by the kind of gamification and the scores. And yeah, that real time piece, it just really enables me to kind of focus more on, if I am trying to work on something within my stroke or focus more on the effort, I can dedicate all my focus to that, and it just generally makes my swim experience a lot better. And I know, Chris has really been leveraging the like coaching aspect of that. I don't want to step on your
No.
toes.
Well, I think everything Chipper said, but the real downside for me is I already know my ability to count laps or count lengths is gone. It's gone. I'm never, like, if you threw me in a pool now and told me to swim 500, I'd have a rough. I'd probably swim like 800 and be like, "Is that it?" It's bad. It's real bad.
Yeah, what you don't use, you lose, isn't it? And when you become reliant on that, yeah,
For sure.
counting's
Like
out the
phone
window.
numbers.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Cool. Well, I mean, I think so Effortless Swimming is your coaching practice, and I have consumed many hours of your own YouTube videos. And my wife has rolled over in bed several late nights looking as I'm like, okay, how does the catch work? And I'm trying to work on my stroke. That she's like, what are you doing? I'm like, I'm working on my stroke here. Okay. I'm working on my stroke. So I've tried to solve my own problems there. And I think what really clicked with me is just the way that you're able to kind of break it down to be very simple. And you really rely pretty heavily on having that like underwater film footage to really break down the stroke mechanics. And I think that is, I mean, I've tried that myself a few times, and I find that to really be the kind of most eye-opening piece. I would assume that's why you prescribe it so much, is, you think you're doing something one way, but then you're actually doing it a completely different way. Is that kind of the feedback that you get from when you have your clients do underwater or film themselves?
Yeah, totally. it's such an eye opener. And when I think back to when I first really started doing it, I was filming people in clinics and then analyzing it, but I didn't film myself for about 18 months, I think, because I just didn't have someone there to film. And when I first looked at my footage, I thought, this is going to look so good. And I look at it, and I'm like, oh my God, there is so many things wrong with my stroke. And to me, that was like a personal one where I get, man, this is okay. This doesn't matter how long you swum for, there's always things to work on. Yeah. But I feel it's just like ripping off a Band-Aid. It's like, it's painful to look at sometimes when you see yourself swim and you go, God, I don't look good. I don't look efficient. It's not a pretty thing to watch. But when you rip it off, it's like, okay, that's the first step to letting it heal. So it's great to get that footage. And even if it's not underwater, you can get really good quality footage above the water. And that tells 50% of the story. I think you can really garner a lot from that. But it's not that hard to get underwater footage. There's some pretty cheap underwater cameras, and recording yourself from the front and from the side at hopefully like race pace. And, it might be like a 70% effort, depending on what events you're doing. You can really tell a lot. And I'd like to think that if you watch enough videos, like I do these Feedback Friday videos on YouTube where I break down swimmer's stroke, and I follow a pretty simple formula there. And going through that sort of formula, I think most people can get a rough idea of what they need to work on. And I'll go through that formula now. It's like, it's head and body. We always want to look at that first, because how we sit in the water, how we position our head, we've got to take care of that first, because number one, we've got to work on minimizing drag. Then we often go to the kick, and the kick, I mean, with Swimrun, that's non-existent pretty much. So your legs will be floating out the back. But if you're doing any training without your big buoy between your legs and your runners on, if you're training with them, but we just want to make sure that kick's not slowing you down or you're putting too much effort into it. We then go to the rotation, making sure you're not over or under rotating. And the sweet spot is 30 to 40 degrees for most people. That could be a little bit flatter through the hips if you've got a big buoy on, but about 30 to 40 through the shoulders if you're looking directly front on. Then we go to the recovery over the top of the water. So what are the arms doing? And then we look at the entry and then the catch and pull after that. So it's look at minimizing drag, first of all. Then we work on increasing propulsion after that. And I mean, minimizing drag is mostly taken care of with the buoy on. But so I guess that's a benefit to doing some run. A lot of it is about just what's happening under the water, really. Because even above the water, you're probably not going to be impacted too much there.
Yeah, for sure. Well, let me ask you a question, Brenton, because it almost seems like counterintuitive. Like when you think it's like, hey, you're learning to swim, learn how to catch it and, learn how to do a stroke. Like you'd think that would be the first thing you should try to figure out. But the way you mention it, it just seemed, after hearing you say, of course, what you should really be focusing on is sort of alignment, your position in the water, and only then really work on developing like sort of speed and power once you kind of have everything else dialed in. Is that sort of your reasoning?
Yeah, that's right. The way I got taught was you swim from the inside out, meaning your core outwards, because any power is going to be generated from the middle out to the extremities. And just learning how to hold your body correctly. It's not complicated, I think, but it's something that we sometimes just skip past. And if you haven't got this tautness to your body, if you're like this wet noodle just wriggling through the water, you're not going to be able to connect up any power from the extremities. So just holding the body right makes a big difference. It's like, attaching a really powerful engine. You got the wheels there, but the chassis is, snapped in half, and it's just not going to be effective. So it's really just about getting those basics right. And it's tempting to want to just go straight to the catch. And you may have seen it or been through it, but I've got this 5-day catch challenge that we've had lots and lots of people go through. And it's the caveat I'd say when they go through, that I want them to know when they go through that course, is that the catch can make a huge difference if you've got these other things in place first. But if you're not holding your body right, or if your legs are sitting really low, you're going to be limited with how much quicker you can get by improving your catch. So I think it's always good to go through that order, just like building a house, or as Brett Hayden says, it's like putting together IKEA furniture. You've got to go through each step in the right order, or you're stuffed at the end. So
I've definitely tried to outsmart IKEA directions before, and I just end up
difficult,
and then like just following the directions. Like, I'll cheat ahead a little bit here. Yeah, I mean, I certainly, I think when I first started trying to teach myself how to swim, it was like I can just power through this to go faster. Like, let me just flail my arms faster in the water. But as I learn more about swimming and try to become a quote unquote better swimmer, it is so much all so connected and like very fluid to get that connection in. And yeah, so I mean that makes total sense that you would want your body position and everything in a good spot before you really try to fine tune any of the other bits there. And yeah,
And
that catch challenge, I have signed up for that. So you have my $10 or whatever.
yeah, and look, any when someone's gone through that and I see their stroke, anything they're doing well with their catch, I'll take credit for. Anything they've got to work on, well, that's on them. So that's the kind of swim
Love it.
coach I am.
Love
But
it.
something that you touched on there was you mentioned like the rhythm and there's like a flow to it. That's a big part of it too. I think as adults and people who learn to swim as an adult, they get hyper focused on the technical side of things and don't tune into how they're feeling into that rhythm in the water. So I see there's two brains. There's the feeling brain and the thinking brain. And that thinking brain is certainly necessary for when we're going through drills and working on our stroke. But we need to really shift back into that feeling brain when we're going through our session, provided we've got decent enough technique, because everyone's had those good sessions or those good swims where they're like, this is feeling good. My times are going really well. And it's rare that that's when they're in this thinking brain. It's usually when they're just in the flow of things. So I think it's important to identify the difference between the two, but really shift to that feeling side of things once they got things in place. So I'd normally recommend people go, think about things in your warm up, then just get into the rhythm and flow of it afterwards in your main set.
That was going to be my question, because here's my last cycle for the last 24 months of my swimming journey. Watch an Effortless swimming video, like, okay, I need to work on my entry point, and that's all I could think about for my whole 90-minute hour-long swim session. But taking your advice, it sounds like dedicate the warm-up and maybe the first kind of pre-main set or drills as, hey, I'm going to focus on one specific piece, breathing, kick, whatever it might be, focus that, and then turn off the thinking side and go with the flow, go with the flow side for the main set, or the like meat and potatoes piece. Is that how you would sort of like prescribe out a workout?
Yeah, absolutely. And it doesn't mean that you switch off from thinking about those things, but it's just in the back of your mind, but it's not the thing that you're hyper focused on, because it can just be very hard to kind of get going and kind of get the stroke rate up and like enjoy your session as much. So I think there's got to be a balance between the two. But the way that you said it there, in the warm up, that's your thinking time. But outside of that, go to that feeling side of things. And I say that because there is a swimmer that I'm been working with recently, and he's a good example of this, where he's actually got a very good stroke and very good technique because he's been hyper focused on it for the last 3 years. But what he's lacking is the fitness side of things and the ability to push himself, because he's just focused on the technical side of it. So you really need both, especially for Swimrun, when it's so oriented to some of these longer distance events. Like, you just need the Ks under your belt or the miles under your belt, and you just need that fitness side of things. So you never want to skew too far in one direction, depending on what you're training for, obviously.
Yeah. And here's like another plug for form. So I think it's easy in a main set when you don't have to think about, lanes, length.
Yeah.
And you can focus, you can really get into it more because you're not trying to remember like where you're at in the swim. So let's move to Swimrun. I mean, we've been talking about it sort of around it a little bit, but for Swimrun, one of the things we always advise people is like, hey, you have to be prepared for the swims. The more prepared you are for the swims, the less of an ordeal a swimmer can become, because, the swims can be challenging across. As a swim coach, we always ask is like, how do you feel about paddles? How do you feel about buoys? Is there any advice that you give specifically for training up that unique ability for Swimrun?
Yeah, I think you want to be as specific as you can for the events that you're doing. And that's something that I had to learn as a coach, coming from a pool swimming background to then starting to coach triathletes, where it was like I was trying to train them like swimmers. And the thing is, they're wearing wetsuits. The swims are relatively long compared to some of the pool events. And the way that they looked and moved, like they didn't have the same mobility as the pool swimmers. So that's when I started to realize I was making some mistakes in my coaching, and I saw other coaches having good success with triathletes in taking a slightly different approach. And so then when it comes to swim run, well, I guess it's those things are even more skewed towards where you got the body position taken care of, and a lot of it is just what's happening with the upper body. So I'd be thinking, large part of your training should be with paddles on, perhaps even just changing the size of the paddles that you're using in training. You don't want to just overload them every session with the really big paddles. But using a lot of buoy, or even just the floaty shorts.
Yeah.
We call them cheat pants here, but I think they're like
Yeah,
they've
short
taken over the
pants.
squad that I see. Yeah, it's funny. The squad that I swim in here, one person got them about a month ago, and they've just fed through the entire squad. So nearly all the guys are wearing them now. So I'm the last one standing for now.
Okay, yeah. I'll say, they mess up your great tan that you get from the Speedo too. So you can't have
Yeah,
that.
that's right. So so I think it just be very specific about your training, and part of that too. It's just you don't want to get injured. You don't want to overload the front of the catch too. I mean, one thing that I see even when people aren't doing swim run, they're just doing normal swimming, is they try and really rip hard at the start, and they use the first part of their catch. So from once you've entered to then when your fingers point down, they're trying to really muscle that part, but you're not that strong overhead, and that's just providing a little bit of lift, that first part. So the power zone in IC is really being underneath the shoulders as your hands moving under there. And again, you don't want to make that a 10 out of 10. It's like maybe a 7 out of 10. You're not putting as much effort in as you can. So just being measured and balanced with where and how you apply the power as well, because something that you sort of alluded to before, it's like when you first started, you thought, I'm just going to go harder and faster with my arms and that'll move me forwards. But it's not quite that simple. So it's about being more effective with the movements you're doing.
Yes, alarm bells are going off in my head. I'm like, I'm very guilty of the like grip and rip situations sometimes and all that. Yeah, just jacks your heart rate up, and before you know it, you feel like you're going to blow up and you haven't really gone anywhere. One more piece of gear we do like for swim run specific, we do like the buoy paddles, and then we'll put on that big ankle strap to kind of simulate a little bit of the drag with the shoe, and that does sort of kind of help a little bit, like forces a little bit more tautness throughout the body as well. It's also diabolically evil for that, and they usually have to retile the pool after we use it, but that's one extra one we add on.
Yeah, I think that's a good one. And I think I was talking to a triathlete, I had him on the podcast, Matt, when was this? 2 months ago. And he was saying that he was an adult learner as well for swimming. He's a pro triathlete, and he did a lot of pull buoy and band work where he had it at his ankles. So he had the buoy and the band at his ankles just to work on that core stability and strength. And I think just even if you've got the buoy up higher and the ankle strap on, it still works that core stability and strength. So you're probably going to be snaking through the water a little bit as you do it, but it helps just tighten that up and bring that tautness in. So I think it's a really good tool to use.
Yeah.
I struggle to keep my feet up if I've just got the ankle strap on. Like I really struggle with it. Yeah, it's hard. So anyway, we're all suckers for torture, especially you guys doing the events that you're doing. So
that's for sure. So all the swim legs, the swim runs take place in open water. And I know, if you're like and I, most of 90+% of your swimming is in a lap pool. So how do you think about, and how do you kind of recommend maybe for triathletes or for swim runners that you're coaching, kind of working on some of those open water skills to gain comfort with open water? I know people are like, oh, I'm good in a pool. Like, I can do whatever, but put me out in a lake or in the ocean. It's like, oh, you kind of forget how to do it all.
Yeah. It feels like a different sport in itself sometimes when you get to the open water. So there's nothing better than just getting to the open water if you can. And I know that's not an option for a lot of people, but it's worth getting there if you can, at least in the lead up to a race. So let's say 6 weeks out from a race, if you can get there once a week, each week, that's going to set you up pretty well and just give you the feel for not having flat and still water. Otherwise, in some pools, I've swum in some indoor pools where the lanes are pretty tight. The gutters aren't like the wet deck. They're up high. So I can feel like open water there sometimes too, So a benefit of that. But yeah, if you can get to the open water, it makes such a difference. And you talk to any elite level open water swimmer, they might train 10 times a week. They'll typically do 9 of their swims in the pool to work on that fitness element. But then once a week, they'll go to the open water to get the open water swim practice. So I think that's a pretty good model for a lot of people. But then, if you've got other people to train with, you want to try and replicate that. So whether that's swimming right behind them if you are on a tether, or if you've got a group, maybe you do some 25s or some 50s where you're either practicing drafting or swimming as a group just to simulate the splashing and all that sort of stuff as well. But I think my general rule of thumb for when you go from the pool to the open water is you want to think of your recovery as being higher, wider, and faster. So higher as in like your hand is probably going to come over the water a little bit higher, sometimes above your elbow here rather than quite low, because you're going to have the chop. So just get that hand over a little bit higher. You might be a bit wider with your recovery, especially if you've got those paddles on, because you just can't come as close to the body. And then faster. So you don't gain anything from that above water part of the stroke because it's all happening underwater. So we generally want to be that little bit quicker over top. We don't want to spend all day just getting the hand over the top because it's wasted time. So not super rushed with it, but higher, wider, fast is a general rule of thumb that I'd use for changing your stroke from the pool to the open water.
Yeah, and to your point, just getting out there, experiencing open water gives you a chance to work on your transitions from run to swim as well for swim run specific stuff. But that'll really help you kind of dial in like, oh yeah, my stroke, I do normally recover in the pool very low, and I'm nicking my hand and throwing it off cattywampus. But yeah, you need to get the higher recovery there. So yeah, we always try to recommend those sessions as well before race there. And then like I've worked with some swim coaches that practice sighting in the lap pool, every 5 strokes, like pick a sight, whether if it's the diving platform or whatever. But is that something that you kind of prescribe for the sighting specific kind of skills?
Yeah, I think that's a great way to go about it. We normally swim in a 50-meter pool, so we might do hundreds where you have to sight 4, maybe 5 times in the lap just to get used to it. And another kind of rule of thumb there is if you're doing repeat 100, and like sometimes we do a set of say 8 100s, one of those would just be normal, and then the second one would be sighting every 4 times within a lap. And if you can get your times to be within about a second of each other, no more than about 2 seconds, that's a pretty good marker for your sighting well. Because a lot of people don't sight properly. They either lift their head up for too long, or they're kind of throwing their head forwards and looking that way, as opposed to sighting and then breathing. So that's a really common one that I see. There's a lot of room to improve there too, because you lose your rhythm if you sight in those other couple of ways. And look, sometimes you do have to have your head up, take a couple of strokes to get a look at it. But generally, I'd recommend sight and breathe. That way you get a look, turn to the side, and it keeps the rhythm of your stroke going really well. So if you're not within about 2 seconds of your normal time when you introduce sighting, then you might need to look at making that a little bit more fluid with the rest of your stroke.
Oh, that's a great tip. Yeah, and to like repeat it back a little bit, you don't want to disrupt the flow that you're trying to maintain by like sitting up like an otter or something and like looking where you're trying to go. You want to keep with the flow there. So I like the 1 to 2 second rule on that piece. I have something about.
Yeah.
and just when it comes to the sighting as well, a few things that I find are quite helpful. When you do go for the sight, you can use your lead hand that's in front of you once you've entered. You can use that to just press down a little bit to help lift you out of the water. And you want to lift a little bit through your chest, because you obviously want to keep your hips up, which they'll be up with your buoy in. But you want to lift through the chest a bit to get your eyes as high as you need to out of the water to be able to see, but no higher than necessary. But using that lead hand, you can then lift up through the chest as well, get the sight, and then roll to turn for the next breath. So you get comfortable using that hand there. And I find it takes about probably 10 to 15 minutes of practice for most people to make that transition from what they might be doing if it was incorrect to the correct way of sighting. But once you get it, it's just it's quite easy. A little bit like tumble turns once you get it. flip turns. It's like,
Yeah.
it can feel like this is this big challenge, really hard to do. But then once you kind of get used to it, like riding a bike, it's easy. You don't have to think too much about it. Although you guys probably aren't flip turning much with the buoys on. So
Yeah, not with the big ones. It
really
really
big
is
ones.
tough to trying to like wrestle it when you're trying to do your flip turn. But
It's like a flotation device,
Yeah.
or it's like a emergency flotation device. So Brenton, I'm curious, because this podcast always ends up being incredibly self-serving to Chipper and myself. We have a race coming up, Casco Bay. We're very excited about it. It's about like 8,000 yards of swimming total.
8Ks, yeah.
There are some pretty big swims, a couple swims that'll be close to a mile, a couple swims that'll be, maybe like a K each. So I'm just putting you on the spot as a swim coach. So what would you recommend for like, hey, what yardage should we be able to do? What sorts of workouts make sense? What are you thinking would be like at least like a key session that would be important to feel like you're really prepared for the race?
I think especially for those longer swims, I really value your longer sort of zone 2 sessions, but then also doing ones where you're getting up closer to your CSS or your threshold sort of pace. So some of my favorite sessions are ones where you progressively get quicker, where you're sort of descending in the pace that you're hitting. So like an example of that, I guess a classic one is like your 10 400s, where you go 4 at roughly 70%, 3 at 75, 2 at 80, 1 at 85, somewhere in that sort of range. But those ones where you have to start steady and then progressively build through it. So you actually have to get quicker, because that's one of the biggest challenges for a lot of people, is being able to hold their pace and actually get quicker. Most people tend to drop off towards the end of a session. So I think those ones can be really good. When I was training for some longer distance swims that I was doing, and actually the swim run stuff, I was doing like main sets might be, sometimes, not always, but like some main sets might be 6K, and it's just like 6 by 1,000, and you mix it up. You might do, one swim, one pull, one pull buoy paddles, and you might break that down into 10 ones or 5 2s and things like that. But just sometimes getting the Ks in the arms, keeping that heart rate steady, I think is great. But then, I think just building up and actually progressively getting faster. The squad that I write these programs for, we do quite a few of those. And I think leading into race season, and that's obviously switched for us here in Australia, but for you guys, that I find that really gives people a lot of confidence that they're going to have the fitness come race time.
Yeah.
And because confidence is a big part of it too. It's like, I know I've done the work. I've seen that I can actually progressively get faster over a 4K main set. And I think that's a really good way to go about it. What sort of sessions do you find you guys respond best to, or you feel like you've got the fitness needed for it?
Yeah, that's the long endurance with the gear on, with the paddles and buoys on, like whether if that's a couple 4x500s or even 6 or 800s. On that is definitely like a key session that we try to get in before a race, on one, like making sure that we just have sort of that endurance with the gear on and can kind of lock in that pace and just execute on it, is definitely one of the key sessions. And trying to, we're swimming 3 or 4 times a week, maybe 10 to 12Ks a week, but getting a 5K or a 6K session in is kind of like I always feel good. Like when I get 5K, I'm like, okay, like solid, like,
there.
it's there, like feeling good about that. So that's the type of thing. And, from what we hear about listeners, that they are kind of apprehensive, like, oh, there's, 4K total of swimming. Do I need to be able to swim in a lap pool 4K straight? And our advice is always, well, look at the individual legs. One leg might be 250, and then you have a 300, and then, so just make sure you can kind of manage the longest leg. But I think in totality, having a 3, 4, 5K swim session at once, is a good, like you said, for that confidence, like, hey, yep, check, I know I can do this. And that's really good injection of confidence for the race.
Yeah, I totally agree. And for some people that I've coached, I have if they're doing like an Ironman, for example, so it's 3.8 kilometers, whatever that is in miles, 2.4. But
Yeah.
it's, sometimes if they're lacking the confidence that, I don't know if I can do this, I would say, all right, well, let's just do that in training, just to give you that confidence. But in reality, let's say you're doing some 400s, 500s, and the main set is 4K. Well, yeah, you might be taking 15 seconds rest in between, but it's still essentially the same thing. And I think you're better off doing those intervals where you actually get some rest at the wall, because obviously you get that little bit of recovery time, your muscles get a rest, and you can maintain better form and technique, and you can kind of get a reset and you're ready to go again. Otherwise, if you're just only doing these long continuous swims and you're treating it like you're doing a run training session, I think you leave a lot on the table there. You just can't really train the same way. So that's something that people who are new to the sport as adults, they come in thinking that they go for a run. I'm going to go out for a run, I'm going to go for a swim, and it's going to be 1,500 or 2K straight. But they just are lacking in that knowledge of how a good swim session is often structured. And when they transition to that, they can really see a big improvement from there.
Yeah, I think that point is really well taken. I think like it has been like now it's been like 4 years where we've always gone to the pool with a plan of what we're gonna do, and it's never like, oh, we just go mess around. Oh, maybe I'll like maybe I'll just do 50s or it's like there's always like some agenda that gives you an opportunity to stick to, and we find that's really helpful. I'm curious to ask you, it makes perfect sense. Like, yeah, you should be able to swim the distance. When you're teaching people and you're, one thing we heard from a friend of the show, Jerry Rodriguez, who's Tower 26 coach, who we love. We think he's on your level in terms of genius. He liked teaching people in 25-yard or shorter pools, because actually getting to the wall gives you an opportunity to reset your form. Mm-hmm. So if it's a longer swim and you're just going and you're doing bad technique, like we're just reinforcing bad habit. Do you see that? Would you agree with Jerry that that's another reason why you'd want to break up sets? You can sort of reset and make sure that you're focusing on or correcting technique mistakes.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and a big fan of Jerry, and I've had him on our podcast a couple of times, and he's got I've learned a lot from him, and he's got some really good takes on swimming and how to improve that as a triathlete or a swim run athlete. And I'd agree. I mean, we run our swim clinics in 25-meter pools. For that reason, we're doing 25s of drills, sometimes 50s, but it just gives you that opportunity to stop, reset, and go again. So while it can be a little bit maybe frustrating if you're in a 25 pool compared to a 50, because if your main set, it's lots of turns, but it does give you that opportunity to get a little bit of rest sometimes. So I think that's a great way to start out. And if you work on those good skills early on, and then you start to just get comfortable pushing that out and starting to work the fitness side of things a little bit more, I think that's a great approach. So yeah, just not getting stuck in only doing technique work, especially if you are training for an event. So you really need both. And if you're going underdone and you haven't done the training, you learn that lesson pretty quickly. So you guys have gone into the race like that before.
We've learned it, or at least we thought we were ready.
Which event was this?
Oh my goodness!
This was way back in 2018, where
this was the first time we did Casco Bay.
We have a lot of good excuses, but Brenton doesn't really care about them. But there was, I remember one specific swim we both got to, and we looked at each other. We're like, "Do you want to lead it?" And he's like, "No, do you want to do it?" I'm like, "I'll go until I like basically blow up, and then you can lead." And then but those days are in the rearview mirror, luckily for us.
Yeah, well, now we know that it's like I mentioned earlier, the whole point is to not try to turn this thing into an ordeal and have it be fun and like fun adventures going through nature. And one of the ways you can really minimize the possibility of an ordeal is to just be a strong swimmer and be prepared for the swimming, because you could always walk, if you need to take a break while running, right? But you don't want to just be like floating on your giant cool buoy, in the middle of the
current doesn't move that fast. No. It reminds me of the first and only swim run that I did. It was, I think it was about eight or so kilometers of swimming and 30 something K of running. And
Wow.
I was not prepared. And I had to catch a flight like immediately afterwards. So we ended up just making the finish line. I had to dash off and catch a flight. But the whole time, like I didn't do any practice with any of the equipment on. So I just didn't know what I was in for because a friend invited me to do it. And man, it was cold. It was hard work and I didn't have enough food. And so it was an ordeal. It wasn't fun or any sort of adventure in nature. Lessons were learned. Yeah, lessons were learned for sure.
Yeah. Well, when we crossed that finish line, we were like, well, wasn't that a ridiculous thing? And then I was like,
Which one should we do next?
At least you didn't stop there, hey? That's
Yeah.
there must be some sort of enjoyment.
I know.
Yeah.
Look at us now. We've got a show and everything. It's crazy.
Awesome. Well, Brenton, it's been like really amazing and a little bit surreal chatting with you. And thank you for taking the time to chat with us. But if you're looking for any help with your swimming, obviously we can't recommend Effortless Swimming enough. I know Chris and I have sent videos back and forth multiple times. A lot of tremendous free advice and content that you're giving out on your YouTube channel. I'm subscribed and notifications, bells, thumbs up, whatever I could do there. So I recommend you do the same. And yeah, you have such a deep database of those Friday breakdown sessions that are good. I enjoy watching a couple of those on my lunch every Friday. I'm like, okay, what breathing? Let me see how many breathing videos we have. And I'll get a nugget or two out of each one. So, really, really great collection of content you have out there. So, thanks for that. I've personally enjoyed that a lot. But head over to Effortless Swimming, and you have stroke challenges. You have all sorts of guides, video analysis, a complete offering over there.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for having me on. I'd love to chat about swimming, obviously. But great to chat with you guys. And I appreciate you having me on. And if anyone's listening, if you're in Australia, we run clinics all around the country. So I'd love to meet you there. Otherwise, we've got lots of YouTube videos. So if you're looking to improve your swimming, I think the YouTube videos are probably a good place to start. So thank you very much.
Of course. Well,
Thanks, Brenton.
Hopefully we'll see you out at a swim run. We likely won't make it to Australia, so you'll have to come to the States.
You'll have to let us know. You have to let us know if you're signed up for a swim run.
I'll do it before I do another triathlon. I think the bike is not my thing. So swimming and running, that's fine. Yeah.
Perfect.
One foot in the door.
Thanks, Brenton. Appreciate you.
Thanks, guys.
That's it for this week's episode. Thanks so much for listening to the show. Make sure to subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts and leave a rating or review, since that's the best way to help other people discover the show and the sport of swim run.
Check out our website, lowtideboys.com. That's boys with a Z, for swim run resources, including gear guides, tips, how-to videos, and so much more. Make sure to check out our meme page at The Low Tide Boys on Instagram. If you have any questions or suggestions for the show, send us a DM or email us at lowtideboys@gmail.com.
We'd like to thank Riding Easy Records for our show music, and of course our wives for their support and tolerance of our swim run and other activities.
Lots of activities.
Lots of activities.
Finally, you can support our efforts on Patreon. Until next time, get out there and go for a swim.
Then a run.
And then a swim.
Then another run.
Then another swim.
Then run some more.
Just keep going.
Let's go.
And then stop at some point because,
And fuel. Don't forget to fuel.
Gotta fuel
Of course, yes.